When working on my comic this week, I came across a big problem that stopped me in my tracks. I had to draw something that I've never drawn before, and I ended up creating this page, which kinda sucks. But then I did something new, and the page went from this to this. Most importantly though, I had a much easier time drawing this page than this one, so not only are the results better, but I was able to draw this much faster because, believe it or not, I redrew this page 4 times before realizing that I wasn't getting anywhere with it. And if you haven't yet experienced that with your comic, then I'm telling you, it's coming. And in this video, I'm going to show you exactly what you can do so you can avoid this every single time. So the reason that we plan before we start drawing our comic is so that we're not having to guess what we have to draw. We need to know what the characters look like and what the setting and environment looks like before we start our comic, right? I mean, that's obviously a no-brainer. But if your comic is 100+ pages long, then it's unreasonable to expect you to plan for every single thing that you're going to have to draw. And most of us don't even think about the things that we've never drawn, including me. These could be things like lightning or explosions or a transformation of a character that you hadn't considered when you were planning and plotting out your comic 6 months ago. Whatever that thing may be for you, I'd bet good money that it's something that you have not considered yet. Even while watching this video, you probably don't know what that thing is going to be. This is especially true if you're in the pre-production phase of your comic. I'll talk more about phases later. So what we have to do in order to avoid this is plot a certain number of pit stops along our comic creation journey. These are strategically placed pauses in our comic so that we can stop and then look ahead at the next phase and make sure that everything is in order before we continue. This is key for maintaining momentum and making sure that we're feeling positive and confident while we're drawing. To figure out how many pit stops you need, take your overall page count and divide it into segments. I did this for my comic and I divided it in about 25 page segments, roughly. So that left me with about 5 segments in total. So when you've divided your comic into segments, you know that each segment is a pit stop. So what do you do when you get there? The first thing to do is to look at the script for that next segment and note down all the things that you either have never drawn before or you're not 100% sure what it looks like. This can be anything, and how granular and detailed you are is up to you. This is what I ended up noting down for my pit stop. I realized I really needed to figure out this character's powers, and from there I looked ahead and did the same for other things like certain environments and even some characters that I'd forgotten to do designs for. Sorry, Cerberus. You're a good boy. Now all I have to do is work my way down the list and I can get right back in the saddle and continue on making my comic. And with this list completed, I'll go into that next segment of the comic feeling a lot more confident, a lot happier about the pages that are coming up. Not only that, but it's helped fill up my excitement fuel gauge for working on my comic. We all have one and it's in your armpit, hence pit stop. Is that the worst joke I've made on the channel? Probably. Now, your natural inclination would be to not do anything that I've just said, and instead think, oh, well, I'll just plan even more at the beginning, which makes all of this redundant. And I get it, because that's exactly what I would have done. I don't want to have to pause while I'm making my comic. I'd rather just get all the planning done straight away, and then I can just work on my comic all the way through to the end. Now, there are a couple of problems with that mindset. First, you don't know what you don't know, so it's really difficult to plan for that. And second, it just means that if you put all of that time in the planning stage, then you're going to be spending even longer in that pre-production phase than you would have been normally. And that means a longer period of time of you not actually working on your comic. Now, I love planning. I think planning is really underrated and it's something that I've grown to really appreciate over time. But even I can admit that you don't want to spend that long in the planning phase because then your comic will never get finished. So instead, by having these pit stops, we're using them to refuel and continue our momentum forwards. So we're getting the best of both worlds. We're planning really well and we're actually making the comic, because at the end of the day, that's what matters the most. Now, the things that you write down for your pit stop, these are your pain points. These are the things that you're not sure about and that could trip you up when you come to that particular page. I originally wrote down my pain points in the journal in my comics Notion planner, and while that was great for figuring out this idea in the first place, it wasn't great for referring back to. So I made this. This not only lists the pain points, but it enables me to track them and tick them off one by one. This is also in Notion and it's available for free if you want to use it. Now, if you've bought my comic Notion planner, then you can add this pit stop page within your planner, and I've got a video on Patreon that's available to anyone if you want to see how to do it. It's like 30 seconds long because it's ludicrously easy. I found this to be incredibly helpful, and I'll be using it moving forwards, not just for this comic, but probably for every comic I ever make. But if a scrap piece of paper works for you, or a whiteboard like I've got on my wall here, then you do you. We're all different, and what works for one person won't work for the other. So you've divided up your comic and plotted your pit stops. You've written down all your pain points. Now, how many drawings do you need to do per pain point? That's a fair question, but with respect, it's the wrong one to ask. Because the point of drawing these pain points is to give yourself an idea of how you're going to draw the thing in the context of your comic. So instead of how many drawings should I draw, the question should be, do I understand this? Take this as an example. I didn't understand how I was going to show this character using her powers until I did these studies. And after doing a few of them, I had a much better idea of how I was going to depict these in the comic, which is how I was able to create that final page. For you, you might do one drawing and think, yep, nailed that, onto the next one. Or you might do 20 drawings. Maybe you won't draw at all and will instead create a 3D model of an environment to guide you. That also works, and it's what I do for my comic as well. Now, if you find yourself drawing something over and over again and just thinking, I'm not getting this, then don't worry too much. Just move on to the next thing in the list and come back to this later. Sometimes when we're faced with a boulder, then we feel that the only way to go around it is to punch through it. And only Chris Redfield can do that. So by doing something else and then coming back to it, you'll have a new perspective and realize that there are other ways to solve this particular puzzle. Like climbing over it, Chris. Why do you have to punch through everything? Dickhead. Because at the end of the day, that's what artists and comic creators are, right? They're problem solvers, not boulder punchers. Which is what we're doing with these pain points. We have a problem and we're finding a solution. Now, that doesn't mean pretty drawings, it just means giving us a more solid idea of how we're going to do something. Because what you don't want to do is approach a page in your comic not knowing how to depict something, whether that's lightning or an explosion or whatever your pain point happens to be. Because that will lead to a subpar comic page and a frustrated comic creator. Now, I mentioned pre-production twice in this video so far, I think, so let's talk about the other two as well. So for pre-production, this is your big overall plan. This is where you write the script, the plot, you figure out the character designs and the environments and all that stuff. It's where you decide whether your comic is going to be for print or digital or both. And it's where you have a rough idea of who your target audience is. All of that is still a huge chunk of time and energy just to build that up. And so I'll do a deep dive into that in another video because there's a lot that goes into it. The production phase is where you're actively working on your comic. This is where the pit stops come in. And post-production is where you strategize about your comic's distribution and marketing. And if you want to know how you can start marketing towards your target audience, even if you have no audience at all, then watch this video next.